My name is John van der Water and we're standing here in Beijing, or right in the heart of the Middle Kingdom, as the Chinese would call it. We're about 5 kilometers away from the historical heart of Beijing, which is exactly in this direction, which is the Forbidden City. Beijing has a history of over 3,000 years, but has undergone a massive transformation, especially the last 50 years. During these last 50 years it has grown from 2 to about 22 million inhabitants, and most part of this voracious urbanization has been achieved by the development of residential plots. The idea of owning a house in Chinese culture is of really huge significance. Or as one of my Chinese friends used to say, all of Chinese are almost like domestic animals. They're like birds wanting to build their own nest in order to secure their generational wealth or to secure their future for their family. The intriguing thing for me as a Western architect living and working for over 13 years in China is not so much the perfect pictures that are shown to the outside world of beautiful landmarks, of boulevards, of squares, of beautiful constructed images of skylines, of all these kind of theatrical composed images. But for me the spaces behind these pictures are much more interesting. And I believe we're actually standing in one of these spaces right now. So I would like to share with you my favorite 1 square meter of Beijing, which I'm actually standing on right now. And it's my favorite square meter because I believe everything comes together here. We're so close in the center of China. The tradition goes together with modernity, high goes with low, history goes together with future. I think everything comes together from the panorama of this 1 square meter. So if we look from my 1 square meter to the north, we can see one of the earliest residential developments that was constructed in the 80s and the 90s. And actually it's like an imported housing typology from the Russians. And it's one of the lion's share, I would say, of the massive uniform residential construction that took place after the founding of the People's Republic of China. These buildings are like 6 floors high. Their units in there are around 40 to 60 square meters, and they were sold to local inhabitants for around 3,000 renminbi, so it's around 400 euro per square meter. But the actual value of these houses now goes up to 8,000 to 9,000 euro per square meter. So actually all the people living here behind me are millionaires. So if we look to the west, we can see an example of one of the first high-rise slabs that was constructed in Beijing, I think in the early 90s. They're around 14 floors high, and the units in there are average 40 to 60 square meter. Already now you can see many modifications being done, mainly to try to enlarge the livable area. I estimate there's still hundreds of thousands of these kind of buildings in Beijing, and you can already see the conflict of a society of people that actually start to get new kind of lifestyles, want to get new way of living, but they're building and their residential buildings and their floor plans actually don't allow this. So this is a major challenge for the future. How can we start to construct residential buildings in China that allow a certain kind of modification in the future? So if we look to the south, we can see the linked hybrid residential complex designed by Stephen Hall. And this is actually an example of what happened just before 2008, before the Beijing Olympics took place. That basically all existing residential types or typologies that were invented or developed all around the world were imported into China. And they were adjusted, some of them became successful, some of them became less successful. This is especially this project is different from other typical Chinese residential developments because it's developed according to an open city kind of concept. So actually the whole ground floor level is publicly accessible by everybody in the city. Whereas most of the residential projects in China are like gated communities, closed off and only accessible for people that live there. This project also addresses the idea of uniform residential construction in China. There are over 300 different apartment types in there. There's a lot of sustainable techniques that are integrated in the building. I think in 2 of the main challenges that the development of the residential market or the development of residential architecture in Beijing faces is firstly how to deal with the existing housing stock. So how can we actually adapt or extend the lifestyle of all these buildings that already have been constructed rather than just demolish them and try to build something new in there. That's the first one. And the second one is how to deal with all these rising real estate prices, these property prices. So for most of the young people that actually studied here in Beijing, that come from outside Beijing but studied here, it's impossible for them to buy 1 square meter of residential property, even after working and saving money for 1 year. The Chinese have a saying, 旧的不去，新的不来. If the old doesn't go, the new cannot come. But for me, as a Western architect in China, I hope that these kind of places still will exist also in the future, where old goes together with new.